This is Marketing Jam, a show featuring the brightest minds in marketing.
Brought to you by Canada Post. Head to canadapost.ca/insight podcast for ideas to add value to your marketing.
Hi everyone, I want to welcome you to the next episode of Marketing Jam. I'm so excited. We have Andrew Au here, who I spent some time with on a panel recently while he was here in Vancouver. He is the president of Intercept Group. He's got a ton of insight, a ton of knowledge. I heard his keynote as well, and just full of so many good nuggets. And as well, if you are a subscriber, which I'm sure you are, to Insight Magazine, in the last issue, he had a great article. It was awesome. And this issue was brilliant in that it's full of incredible articles, like people from Andrew writing them. Also, it's got incredible case studies, and the cover actually has a bit of a scratch piece to it, talking about a case study for a mail piece in Africa, which is really awesome. So this is the latest edition of Insight. You cannot lose it. It glows in the dark, basically. It's pretty awesome. So make sure you go and subscribe to this. Again, it's a physical magazine that you could have in your agency's office, in your company's office. My favorite part, of course, I jump right to the case studies and kind of see what ideas that people are doing around the world when it comes to creativity, creative elements, creative direction, when it comes to mixing digital with postage and just really incredible postage campaigns. So, Andrew, starting off, tell us about your origin story. How did you get to be where you are with Intercept Group and the role you play?
Yeah, so, my journey started, this is year 13 for us. And so I was moonlighting at the time. So I was working at Pepsi in the marketing department. So Core 4, as they called it back then. So Pepsi Diet, 7-Up Diet. So I was one of the ABMs that was on the brand. And so, coming out of school, you really don't know anything. So you get in there and you're like, why don't we try and do this? Or, can we try a new technique or a new strategy, a new campaign? And then, typically the response I got was, well, dude, that's why we have an agency. And so I was like, okay. What is this whole agency thing about? So that's how I got kind of introduced to the agency model. And then that's where we were like, look, what can we create, around technology, around like new markets and millennials? So when I say we, my wife and I actually started the agency. And so we're like, well, what do we know best? We know our generation. And that was really before we started calling it millennials. It was just young people. And so that's how the journey started. So I started client side, figured out probably on the wrong side. And then I sort of jumped to the agency side, and it's been 13 years.
Wow. Let's talk about that briefly. Someone who's maybe a marketing student listening to the show or maybe on one of those sides, how would you best describe the difference between client side marketing and agency side marketing?
Man, that's a good question. Based on my exposure in the CPG world, the client side is really around, it's managing the brand success, looking at the Nielsen reports, seeing what kind of share numbers you got, seeing where the volume's coming from, what promos are driving that. So it's a lot of the analytics, it's a lot of the brand strategy, which is super interesting. I think the agency side is more on the creative side, right? So you're coming up with ideas and different strategies, because on the client side, you're busy managing the brand, right? You're project managing budgets, internal buy-in on certain campaigns. So agency, it's a little bit more fluid. It's a little bit more, maybe even I'd say unstructured, a little bit more agile. So it's around idea generation versus client side, I think is, managing success and outcomes would be kind of the main distinction.
In a perfect world, the relationship between a client and an agency people would value and uphold each other's roles. Would you say that?
Yeah, for sure. But I think what ends up happening in reality is we get caught in this. Well, it's agency side versus client side, and I think it's such a wrong way to look at it because, if you're a client and you're being accountable to these outcomes, you've got budget X to achieve that within these regions. You got to be super transparent. Because if you start holding cards so close to your chest, well, then the agency starts to think with these set of parameters, and you don't end up with the best outcome, right? I think where we've got a lot of long-term relationships with organizations like Microsoft and Intuit and FedEx is where we have that very open relationship. Like the agency should be a natural extension of the client. Mm-hmm. I think we haven't got there yet, though. I think there's still a lot of trust issues. And I think from the client side, it's this perception of like, well, if you just kind of be fully transparent and, if you commit to something, well, then you get lazy. Yeah. Right. And I think we see that in any kind of personal relationship too. So it's this, how do you stay engaged at the same time? How do you empower success on both sides? I think that's the challenge. It's all the human stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And the trust side, right? Do you trust each other?
Yeah, of course. Right. And like I get it. Naturally, you're on two different sides. Agencies trying to, obviously they make their livelihood on the budgets that the marketers give them. And, the marketers need to be successful on the client side to drive impact and success. Otherwise, you don't have a job or you don't get budget. Right. So, but they can align. I think if it's, again, both sides are very open and they've got trust where, if you burn trust, it's very difficult to rebuild, but you got to give that shot. And I think that clients are really scared right now because, I mean, you know this too. It's like budgets are declining. You've got a lot of in-housing going on to try and combat that. You got a lot of fierce competition. So they're really trying to figure it out. I think also on the agency side, we don't give the client side enough credit for that because like they're holding the bag, right? You don't hit your numbers. Yeah, you're out of a job, right? So a lot of the product marketers, a lot of the business group owners, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of stuff that they do that we don't see.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah, as you know.
And as Intercept Group, and as when you go into a room with Microsoft and these different clients, what do they see you as? What are you kind of niching out as an agency?
Yeah, so for us, it's really around the modern B2B world, and it's this: how do we get the customer journey right? How do we merge? I always say like sales and marketing together, and we spend an equal amount of time with marketing teams as we do sales teams, and we got to figure out, okay, well, what marketing campaign is actually going to drive, lead generation, brand equity, pipeline, conversion, loyalty, consumption, like actual more revenue-based outcomes. That's really where we're niching is in that modern B2B segment. So Microsoft as an example, how do we sell more Azure to our customers and how do we get them to use it more? Because ultimately, you use it more, you're going to get more consumption, more revenue, right?
Yeah. Are you excited about Bing ads, or are you more focusing on their kind of Office suite and Skype?
Yeah, we do less with the Microsoft advertising group. It's more so on like Office 365, Azure, like the core sort of product suite, and then how does Teams as an example. I think a lot of orgs are still trying to figure out, well, how do we work in a modern way? Yeah. Right. I mean, as they go from like on-prem to cloud, how do we get that right? How do we get the culture right? So, but yeah, that's where we're focused.
So there's a conference coming up, QuickBooks. Intuit's QuickBooks is doing a QuickBooks Connect in Toronto. So is that the idea of being like, hey, we're going to offer these workshops, inspire business owners, and then that's the chance to let them know about the QuickBooks world? Yeah.
So actually, we produced the first QuickBooks Connect in Canada.
Nice.
QBC Toronto, and then Vancouver and Calgary. Yeah, they that's exactly it, right? It's and for what I think Intuit does so well is they capture the small business segment, and that's such a hard segment to engage. Like, and it's huge too. You get 98% of all businesses that are under 100 staff. They're the backbone of the economy, but they're so fragmented. There's so many different industries. How do you reach them? They're busy. I think Intuit plays in a really sweet spot, which is we're going to help you be more financially successful, which that's the top list, right? That's what business owners kind of like keep them up at night. Profitability. How do we grow? How do we get more customers? Managing the P&L. So yeah, that's what it's about. QuickBooks Connect is like bringing people together, learning about new innovation, thought leadership, workshops, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'll be there in Toronto. I'll be in your neck of the woods.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You should come by and say hi.
And where we first met was a Canada Post event. Tell us about that one, because it seemed like it was a packed room full of people learning about. Yeah.
You know what's funny about Canada Post is that they keep growing in terms of the number of attendees. And I find that interesting because most events are actually having the reverse effect. I mean, they're producing fewer events, they're getting fewer people out, and I see them producing more, they're getting more people. So obviously doing something right. And I think for them, they've really, I think, got into the thought leadership side of things. It's, look, for targeted solutions, direct mail solutions, even leveraging customer intel and purchase data, behavioral stuff, all that, they do all that. But they're not like kind of throwing that in your face. It's actually thought leadership content that you care about. I think that's the reason why they're getting the attendees out there. So, that conference was just that. We had, a scientist out there from PwC, and I'm sure you remember, talking about cognitive bias. I was there talking about new technologies and digital transformation, and there was also the founder of Inventa that was there talking about live experiences. So what's cool about that is that it's really like this integrated customer journey, right? It wasn't like DM was an element of many of it, but it wasn't just a conference about direct mail. And obviously your panel as well, right? And what is the future of marketing and marketing strategy? So yeah, they're doing something right.
Yeah, we as an agency work a lot with law firms, and so we go to the law firm events, Taloma, LMA. But I learned at that event through Smart Mail, you can actually get the address of every law firm, and you can even tell Canada Post what size. And then working with Mail-O-Matic, your postage delivery, you don't get that list, but they send it to the mailing house, and then you send your piece that you want to send out, and it's a really efficient, very targeted process. Which again, to be able to do that with LinkedIn or Facebook, it's a lot more difficult to actually be able to send them something physical. And maybe even like Canada Post is famous that, their jelly bean cover, you can send them something like tangible that you can touch, or, this is another great example of Insight has the pop top, right? So those that are just listening, I am holding a bubble wrap covered magazine, and you can maybe just hear that, but it's really creative what can be done in postage today with smells and touch and feel.
Well, the stimulating the senses. And I think we need to go beyond the topic of, is it digital or is it physical, right? Like, and it's around blended, and it's about taking those senses, stimulating them, and then also adding digital components. Like, I think you made some really good points. I mean, we can stimulate senses there, but what I like about some of the solutions that they've got is that you can target by behavior. Like, if we know that they're getting certain Amazon packages, or they're getting certain shipments, we get a sense of what they actually do, because it's funny, right? As marketers, we hear this. Well, we saw the data and they said that 50% self-report that they would do this if they got this. Yeah, but do they actually do it? I think it's a completely other paradigm. That's the real question we want. What do they do? And not just buying, but also I think within the process of, if I'm going through an email drip journey as an example, and I click on something, well, the next step could be digital or physical, right? You can send them a DM piece or something afterwards, or you send them an email or an in-mail as an example. So I think that's the trick right now, is like figuring out what's the right mix, right, for your brand. And again, I think we're still caught on this though. Well, shouldn't we throw all our money in digital? Well, great if you can get 50 million impressions on a population of 30 million people. But what does it mean for sales? Like, what does that actually mean for actions? I think that's the bigger question.
And on the B2B side, it's incredible to know, like, Canada Post knows if a business is moving because we've told them we forward our mail to a new address.
Well, yeah, if you don't want to get a real CRA call on for your business, you got to update your info on things, right? So I think, I think it's reliable information, and I think there's some interesting things that you can do that maybe don't immediately come to mind when you think of mail, like in the Insight mag that's sitting there. I wrote an article around account-based marketing. And one of the products that we were promoting for Microsoft was HoloLens, which is this like holographic headset you wear. brings holographic computing into your world, all this great stuff. But how do you sell that?
Yeah.
You know, when I explain that to somebody, they're like, what are you talking about? Is it like Minority Report? Well, yeah, like, a little bit like that, but it's for your workflows. Well, people don't really get that. So one of the accelerator programs that we did, where we offered companies to actually buy in and say, buy in at X, and we'll send you down to Redmond. You'll sit down with the engineering team, come up with this beautiful HoloLens solution, yada yada yada, get you really on the road versus just talking about the product. Well, we looked at the tactics and the attribution modeling. When we did in-mail, we did email, we did direct mail, we did a number of tactics. The direct mail piece that we sent actually had the highest impact.
Wow.
And that was a mail piece that had an embedded video screen in it. And so cool. You open it. Yeah, those are cool, right? You open it and you're like, oh, wow. So right there, I'm getting them to visualize the solution. And I'm getting it in their hands. And it's something it's got a little bit of weight to it. So it's not something that maybe, if you get it, you may just toss, or the EA may toss. This is something that's got a little bit of weight. Like, what is this? This is a gift. Is it right? So I think that's just one example. And it's just, I'm sharing because we know the inner workings of it, but that's an example of how do you use, it's not about the medium, but it's what are you saying? How are you using the medium, right?
Yeah. We looked into getting those made, and it actually was a company in Seattle that makes those. So we looked at it for higher ed when they were accepted, and they're beautiful looking. Like you flip it open, you can actually have multiple videos within that piece. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So I think is for the marketers listening to this, it's, how do you, it's not just digital, it's how do you digitally transform your marketing mediums and your marketing strategies? I think that's the question. It's not like, let's give all of our money to 3 software vendors. It's think about the journey, what makes sense for the journey, what makes sense for the customer. I think the smart orgs are the ones that are getting that. They're focusing on that.
And I think we live in a time, you mentioned it, touched on it, but we get spam calls, we get spam emails. There's so many digital advertising at us. So when I do get something physical in the mail, like it's almost like a time of rest to be like, oh, I can sit down and read a magazine. I can physically touch something. I can look at something, and it almost gives my eyes a break because it's like, oh, I'm not staring at a screen.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think you're right. I think we're looking a bit for that break. I think right now we're caught in this. Let's procure every piece of tech that we can. And we've talked about this before. And so what I tell people and marketers is forget about artificial intelligence. Okay. Forget about AI. Think about how do you be culturally intelligent with how you engage your customers, with how you empower your people. I think that's, those human elements and factors, I think we're forgetting those. We really are. I think we're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we deploy the next predictive model?
Yeah.
First of all, you need the right data to be able to do that. But second of all, is that culturally intelligent? I don't know. Just because we can do it, I don't know if we should do it.
And I'm watching groups like Rogers, telecommunications. They did a series of physical events in their physical stores for small business owners, giving them small business tips and training. And they were so well attended right across the country. And it was amazing to see that they're like, hey, we spend so much time on our phones and our digital. It's like small business owners just need a physical place to go to, have a little bit of food, and actually meet other business owners and get some human interaction.
Yeah, and when we do research around that, and the Rogers Talk series is great. We ask people, particularly millennial business owners, we say, well, what kind of marketing do you like? Do you like white papers, webinars, ebooks, whatever? What the number one factor was live experiences.
Wow, that's really cool.
And because I think it goes back to that, it's entertaining, it's engaging, it's experiential. I think just because we have technology, it doesn't mean we don't value those things anymore.
Yeah.
It's just how we use technology.
Well, you look at Social Concierge, a group here in Vancouver, the Dayton Cup, the Dinner on Blanc, they pull off these incredible experiences that sell out every time, and it's kind of the hot ticket to get in the city.
Yeah. Well, and I, I use an example too. I forget that. What was the ice cream shop called? Um, but when charcoal ice cream launched in Toronto,
Yeah.
um,
Was it Sweet Jesus?
no, it wasn't. It was another one.
Okay. Okay.
But it was charcoal ice cream,
Yeah.
and people drove an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, an hour to
Yeah.
get to this shop.
Just
Then
so
you
they
see
get
the
for the
line.
gram. Do it for the gram, man.
Yeah. But you know what? An hour there, an hour and a half line. So
Yeah.
and then an hour back. So you think,
Yeah.
but that's 3.5 hours
Yeah.
for charcoal freaking ice cream.
Yeah.
What is convenient about that?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's engaging,
Yeah.
and people,
yeah.
of course, doing it for the gram, right? Being one of
Yeah.
the first to have it.
Yeah.
So I think that's like people like live experiences. I'd say the one thing over convenience that people value is delights.
Yeah.
They love experiences and delights, and I think that's a card we can play.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
It's just
it's
it can be expensive.
yes, and yes, it's a big investment. It's a big risk,
Yeah.
but when it works, it pays off. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
100%.
So tell me about yourself. Are you an iOS or Android guy?
I'm an Android guy.
And tell me about apps that you live what are the apps that you can't live without? What are the ones you're on every day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Apps on thinking my home screen. So Audible for sure. Love Audible. I the efficiency guy. I love reading the books on like 1.5 speed, 1.6.
Did you do Malcolm Gladwell's latest on Audible, the experience?
No, I bought it. I haven't done it yet.
It's incredible.
Is it good?
Oh, it's so
Okay,
good. A fellow Torontan, which is nice.
Yes, yeah, for sure. No, he's great. I mean, such a dynamic thinker. The other one that I have is a meditation app called Mindfulness. And so for any entrepreneurs listening, and I've been part of like EO and YPO before, where I think we all suffer from this, and I'm sure you can relate, is you wake up and you've got a million things in your mind, you're going crazy. So I use mindfulness as that app every morning. I've got a 6-minute segment or a 20-minute segment, depending on when my kids decide to wake up.
Yes, yes,
one or the other.
Yeah.
And so that's key. Spotify for sure, and then I've got a workout app called Strong that I use for just like to track stuff. So that's my home screen.
That's awesome.
Oh,
Amazon.
Amazon. Yeah.
Oh,
dangerous.
Very
man,
dangerous. Way too easy.
Yeah.
Oh man, I have one called Pray As You Go. Is that my little meditation app? It's awesome.
Oh yeah. Headspace is another really good one. We never had that. We never had that growing up. Is these awesome apps, right? And you look for like mindfulness. I think is such a powerful thing. Yeah. It always felt so a bit hoaxy to me. I just wasn't sure. Yeah. And then I tried it, and it just like mellows me out. It sets me on the right path. If I don't do it that morning, people can tell.
Wow.
Like,
okay.
Dude, maybe you haven't done your meditation app today. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Tell me maybe what's some of the most kind of trends that you're seeing that are coming up? What's something that you're following and you're watching, whether it's a brand or maybe just a trend in general?
I think in the marketing world, one of the first trends is in housing. I think particularly on the media buying side, anything that's really, I don't want to say commoditized, because I think there's value in really good media agencies. I think they certainly prove their value. But any of those kind of transactional processes, I think, are getting automated. They're bringing them in-house. Though I would argue that we're seeing in-housing reverse in a way. We're seeing organizations who've been the early adopters in in-housing are actually reversing and going back to outsourcing. Because I think the reality is, like, yes, you do it for cost efficiencies and it's a great story internally for the P&L, but there's value in having someone that has a different vantage point, that doesn't live and breathe the company X world day in and day out. I think you need that. So I think they're starting to see that shift. I'd say in terms of team design, we're seeing more cross-functional teams that we're following. Like, sales and marketing, I think there's still a gap. I think we need to close that gap. particularly with things like account-based marketing. To do that right, you need sales and marketing on the same page. So we're seeing that kind of integration. Teams are becoming more cross-functional. Couple of the other ones is, MarTech stacks, man, they're blowing up. Everyone, like there's a MarTech tool for everything. And the trend though that I'm seeing is they're screwing up, is that they're not integrating together. People are not knowing how to use them. They're not optimized. People are spending boatloads of money on these tools. So I think there's a need there. There's a need for professional development and training on that side also as another key trend.
Wow, those are really great ones. And then as for you, kind of like your hopes and your dreams, you have children and kind of hopes and dreams for your children. What do you think your kids in 20 years, how do you think they'll be marketed to? What do you think is going to happen? Kind of like, what's that crazy idea you think in 20 years? What's the landscape going to be like?
It's funny when I think about my kids and I think about the way they consume content. I'll tell you a quick story. So I took the kids on vacation. This was last year, and they have seen cable TV before, but we don't really watch a whole lot of cable TV. So we're in Mexico. We're in this hotel room. We've got a standard cable TV going on, and so my son and daughter all I hear is them going, skip ad. Skip ad. And I'm like, what the hell are they doing? And I'm looking over them, I'm like, what are you guys doing? What are you watching? And they're like, it's not listening to us. I said, what do you mean it's not listening to you? We're saying skip ad. And it was just this funny moment that they live in the YouTube world, right? Yeah. So, and they were so confused as to why the cable television programming wasn't skipping ads. So, I think the expectation's a lot higher. I think everything's going to be hyper personalized. I think that, we've been saying that for a while, but where I think we're going, when you think like 5G, what that's going to do is really allow us to do real immersive experiences that are hyper personalized, that are culturally relevant, that are timely, because it gives that compute power to right where you are. And I think the reason why we don't see that today in retail and other places is not because we can't think about it. Yeah. It's that when you think about a grocery store and they are processing payments, constantly, they are looking at inventory, their bandwidth is only so much. You want to add some immersive experience where you go down an aisle and something's calling out to you with a personalized offer. They don't have the compute power to do it. Yeah. So I think that with 5G, it's going to unlock this whole new world of like truly immersive experiences. I think that's going to be like the norm for these guys. It's scary though, right? Like you just, like I said before, just because you can do it, should you do it, right? And it makes me think of one other story, and it just really quick. It happened at Target, the retail store, and they've got something called a pregnancy score. So if you start going online and buying like unscented lotions and certain vitamins or whatever, they think, okay, you're probably expecting. So the 16-year-old goes online, starts showing all the signs. She gets grouped in this expecting category. Well, sure enough, she gets a DM that's sent to her home that had a coupon for baby clothes and cribs and stuff. And she didn't get it though. Her dad opened it, and her dad lost his mind. So he goes down to the Target store. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you sending my daughter this stuff? You're trying to encourage my daughter to become a mom. She's 16. And obviously the store has no idea. It's done by Corp. But turns out she actually was pregnant. So, is that compliant? Yeah. Is it accurate? Yeah. Is it creepy? Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we need to figure, is it right? So I think that's where we start talking a lot about ethics when we think about AI and we talk about prediction engines. And it's important because just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. Not for moral reasons, but also if you do it and it's culturally dumb.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think the customer is going to respond? Do you think she bought a crib from Target?
Yeah.
No. But again, no knock on Target, but it's just a matter of, we get excited about these tools,
Yeah.
and we're making these kinds of mistakes. And I think it's good because it's bringing up the conversation. Should we do it?
Yeah, it's much like we have divorce lawyers where we have learned the hard way not to run retargeting ads for that type of law because the current spouse will sometimes go on that person's laptop or phone and discover all these retargeting ads. And,
exactly right.
Yeah.
You got to be culturally intelligent with that too. Yeah, you're right. That's a good example.
I think emotional intelligence will kind of be a future asset that we'll be looking for. And I think events. I love your take on events and the power of events. And I think thanks to Canada Post for introducing us through an event and at an event. We sat together and don't forget to subscribe to Insight Magazine. You get great articles from people like Andrew with some great insight and some amazing case studies. It gets mailed to your office physically in the mail. You can touch it, you can feel it. Every issue has a different cover, a different look, a different feel, whether it's jelly beans or bubble wrap or whatever it is. So thank you, Andrew, for coming on the show. We're so excited
thanks for having me.
To see what's coming out next and to follow you and your agency and what you guys are up to. And I think Microsoft will be happy. We are recording on Skype. And we previously had both Bing, Bing and LinkedIn have both been on the show, and they both have had some incredible things to share. So if you haven't watched those 2 episodes yet, make sure you go back to the archives and you can hear insights from both Bing and LinkedIn. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Marketing Jam, and we'll see you next week.